Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's public meeting organised by the Positive Action Group, and thank you all for coming despite the inclement weather and the competition at the Gaiety Theatre of Joanna Lumley. And of course, there's no competition. This beats that hands down. Right, I'm Damien Chappelli, the chair of the Positive Action Group, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome our panel tonight, who are industry leaders in their respective areas. And the panel consists of, to my right, John Webster, a former government economist, IT business owner and non-executive director. To my immediate right, Tim Bagley, director of the Regency Hotel. To my left, Sarah Comish, general secretary of the Manx National Farmers Union. And to my far left, Carl Jockin, the Vice Chair of the Licensed Fiddlers Association. Tonight's theme is, does the Isle of Man economy work for you? This is very topical at the moment, and I won't steal anyone's thunder, but clearly there are many concerns about the island's economy and where it is headed. The panel will address the economic issues from their perspective. And may I suggest that the objective this evening in responding to that invitation is to identify whether the economy is working or not, and two, if so, for whom? If some areas of the economy are not working, then what levers are within the government's control? And what can they do? Whether fiscally, financially, politically, or legislatively. If the economy is not working for some sectors, then what can be done? I'm just getting a signal that perhaps it's difficult to hear me, so I'm just going to bring the microphone closer. If the economy is not working for some sectors, then what can be done? The ethos of the Positive Action Group is to identify positive action. The clue is in our name, the Positive Action Group. And invariably, that implies that change is necessary. Just a few words about the Positive Action Group. The Positive Action Group has successfully pursued reform over the years of the island's governance by championing for, firstly, freedom of information legislation, secondly, bringing into force human rights legislation, and thirdly, campaigning for the establishment of a Timberwood Ombudsman. These are amongst the many achievements and outcomes over the past 20 years. And so, to tonight's panel debate, our panel will introduce themselves and speak on their chosen area of the Isle of Man economy for up to 5 minutes. And after they've all had a chance to speak, I will invite questions from the floor. So, without further ado, I thank you again, and if we can start with John Webster. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
No. Pull the mic towards you, John.
Okay. Right.
Switch it on.
Is that all right?
You just move the switch up.
Okay, that concludes my 5 minutes. I'll start with an apology. I like to extemporize, but because I've only got 5 minutes and I've got so much to say, I shall refer to my bullet points. If any are not clear and you'd like more elaboration or clarification, please let me know afterwards. So that's my apology, and I do apologize for that. So to answer the question, I looked at what measure would a macroeconomist have, and I would say that the resident population of the Isle of Man want to have. Can't they hear me?
Just can't hear at the back. You just hold the mic.
Oh, you want me to hold it? Okay. Is that better? Yes. Excellent. So what I think any government should seek to achieve for its residents are to safeguard the welfare, the wealth, and protect the culture, heritage, and countryside of the Isle of Man. That's the answer to, if they've done that, they've succeeded, and the answer would be yes to the question posed by the chairman. Unfortunately, I think the answer is no. That's a spoiler alert, and I'll give you the reasons why. First of all, I'll look at three areas. One, the logic of the Island Plan. Two, the nature of its implementation. And three, the consequences or results thus far of that plan. Right, the first point is that the target of 100,000 population has actually no rationale. There's no reason why 100,000 population should have a better profile, demographic profile than the current population. The second is that by bringing 15,000 new residents, 5,000 who should be working, that's a third. 5 is obviously a third of 15. That ratio of about a third is less than the current working population. So if the objective is to increase the working population by bringing 15,000, only a third of whom are working, you're actually not improving that ratio. Secondly, if you are embarking on a population policy, growth policy, then you should start with a well-considered plan to improve and have the infrastructure ready in advance of bringing those people over. Thirdly, immigration with no controls, no monitoring, inevitably leads to an increase in criminality. There's no question about that. The evidence is widespread. The Isle of Man has always been a great place to live. It's a safe environment in a troubled world. Having a lack of quality control diminishes our ability to attract top-notch companies and people. Increasing the labour supply per se, without doing it the other way around, having the business bring in their labour, actually damages the structure of the labour market, and the people who suffer most are those at the bottom end of the labour market, the low-paid, low-skilled. Also, focusing on population and labour supply rather than productivity and business means that you militate against something which is very important, and that is the need to increase productivity, which on the island is particularly low. The previous policies followed by the Isle of Man government in the times when we were building up the reserves was actually the reverse of what we are doing now. We used to attract business first and rely on those businesses to train people and bring necessary skills to the island. That is the horse before the cart. The current situation is the cart before the horse. We're bringing people in who don't necessarily have the jobs. So those are the logical, the theoretical reasons to examine this particular policy. How is the plan being implemented? Well, the Isle of Man government seems obsessed with implementing the plan without using its judgment or considering the implications. It's provided NI holidays. There's no immigrant migration health tax charge, it's called, which is £1,035 per person per annum for the first 5 years in the Isle of Man. By not having that charge, we are losing that ability to get people who haven't previously contributed to contribute to the health service, which I believe, rumour has it, is underfunded. The Isle of Man is now being promoted quite openly and quite brazenly, in a very crude way by many people, as a cheap and easy way to obtain a British passport.
This does nothing for our credibility overseas. The business visas, which are one of the KPIs used by government, actually are widely known to be abused by various people. The accommodation addresses are being used, and if you talk to some immigration lawyers, they will tell you that one of the questions that is often asked is, well, how long do I actually have to be in the Isle of Man? I just want an address so that I can be seen to be using the Isle of Man. We don't want to be seen to be an accommodation address. Migrants who are coming to the island are often charged as much as £12,000 for the privilege, and are being brought here basically as slave labour. And they pay a bond, and I'm not exaggerating you might think I am exaggerating, but I'm not. I can give you lots of chapter and verse on this. They're being brought over, charged to come over. They're being basically used to work in shellfish factories and as cleaners, etc. And they are basically part of modern slavery. The Isle of Man doesn't have any modern laws. It doesn't have the equivalent of the UK's Modern Slavery Act of 2015. And to embark on a policy of bringing people over without such policies is basically not a very sensible thing to do, to say the least. And the Immigration Act of 1971, which provides us with the common travel area and the freedom to travel throughout Britain and Ireland, the Isle of Man, can be amended by the UK if it suspects that we are abusing it. And there's a lot of evidence to show, as I said earlier, that the Isle of Man is being used as that entrance, the backdoor entrance to the British citizenship. Finally, what are the results so far? Between 2021 and 23, according to the government's report, 3,705 people arrived, 2,700 departed. That's a net 461. For those who've just done the maths in their head, it doesn't include deaths, excessive deaths over births. 35% of new people arriving leave within 5 years. And the population report says the immigration has had only a modest impact on the age profile of the Isle of Man. In fact, it goes on to say that by 2036, which is the date when we're supposed to have 100,000, had this policy been working, there will be about 92,000. And the percentage over the age of 65 will have increased from the present 23 to 27%. So we're going through all of this pain, and in fact, the population percentage over the age of 65 will increase. The lack of scrutiny of new people and new businesses has led to things like king gaming, which was heralded as a fine, major, possibly the biggest ever investment ever in the Isle of Man. And look what happened to king gaming. They were using basically slave staff sleeping and working in accommodation, which was just in Howard Pearson House there. So there was not sufficient scrutiny on that. There are more problems to come. The Isle of Man is being cited as the only nation outside of Asia which is being involved in what's called pig butchering. Those who don't know what pig butchering is where people are forced, literally forced, to live in places where they contact people and get those people who are vulnerable to invest in typically cryptocurrency, etc. The Isle of Man is in the centre of that. And I have been contacted by several people from overseas, well-known journalists, who are doing research on this. So the Isle of Man's reputation has been traduced in this madcap haste to increase the population. The Isle of Man deficit is continuing to increase, and we have a hockey stick approach, which is, oh yes, we'll be reducing over the next few years the deficit, and then it'll be onwards and upwards to the sunny uplands, but there's no indication of how we were going to get there. There's no indication of us reducing our cost level, particularly the amount of cost spent on government staff. The increase in the staff pay will be every year in excess of the 10 million which they're looking to save. So labour costs are increasing by a very significant amount each year. They're already 50% almost of overall spending. Higher taxes and charges have reduced the disposable income on the island. And if you look at the real wages levels over the last couple of years, they have fallen. So the people in the retail sector and other sectors who are suffering because there's been a reduction in disposable income for those reasons. And one of the indicators which is often cited is that there are 700 new jobs on the island. What type of jobs are they? I'll give you one example. There's a commie chef, £22,000 for a 42-hour week with 4 dependents. Now, what good is that to the island economy? There's a lack of detail when we're assessing what's happening here, and there's a lack of judgment in bringing these people to the island. The Isle of Man could have been a quality safe haven for people and business, but we have squandered the opportunity, just as we're squandering the reserves which have been built over the previous decades. I could say a lot more, but I think I've run out of my 5 minutes. Thank you.
And now I'd like to call on Tim Bagley, Director of the Regency Hotel, to address his perspective on the Isle of Man economy. Thank you, Tim.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's a bit of a hard one to follow this gentleman here, but I will try my best. I don't think I'll last 5 minutes, but I will have a go. Okay, thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts this evening. Too often as islanders, we sit back and accept things as they are. But I'm delighted to see from tonight's turnout at the Legion that we're not all simply rolling over. Now, I don't claim to be an expert, but after 45 years in the hotel industry, mostly along this very promenade, I've seen the good, the bad, and the well. Let's just call them interesting times. I'd like to address 2 points tonight. First, in response to Minister Tim Johnson's recent comment about not offering sticking plasters for hospitality, I say this: government's role isn't to hand out band-aids, it's to create a thriving environment where businesses like ours can do what we do best, flourish. You might remember the slogan, freedom to flourish. Well, I'd like to see that applied in a more meaningful way. Now, to the matter of the harmonisation of the minimum wage and living wage by April 2025. While most employers already pay above the minimum wage and offer additional incentives, this shift will ripple through our pay structures. Let's be frank, hospitality and retail will feel it very hard. Let me give you an example. An 18-year-old on a 40-hour contract, come April 2025, if this goes through, will be earning over £27,000 a year with no experience. That's a hefty sum to cover when margins are already razor thin. We'll adapt, of course, but it's not as simple as raising rates to match. Some are already making changes. One well-known hotel on the promenade is giving up its function rooms to reduce labour costs. And if this trend continues, we'll see more services becoming unaffordable to offer. The Island Plan of 2022 aimed to support local business, but I say, let's implement it sensibly, not in one sweeping hit. Quality staff are hard to come by, and paying them competitively is only fair. After all, hospitality is not for the faint-hearted, unsociable hours and all the joys that come with it. However, if you have experience in hospitality, you will have a working passport to work anywhere and travel the world. Now my second point, and this may raise a few eyebrows, is the steam packet pricing structure. If we're serious about growing the visitor economy, as outlined in the Island Plan, we must address those fares. Reducing fares in the shoulder month would make it much more attractive for both visitors to come here and locals to take a well-deserved trip off. We've been talking about extending the season for decades, so let's get on with it. Stretching autumn and spring by just 1 month either side could make all the difference. While the steam packet, I'm not going to be critical of the management and the directors, but they are bound by the constraints of the shareholder and the user agreement. And let's not forget, every unsold seat on that ferry is a missed opportunity. Any hotels that I haven't sold tonight are lost forever. I'll never ever get them back. And that's the same with the Manxman. That's money not being spent in our bars, restaurants, shops, taxis, hotels. The government treasury are saying that for each visitor that comes over, they spend around £500. If you add another 100,000 visitors, that will equal 50 million into our economy, which isn't a shabby amount. Now, before the Facebook keyboard warriors come after me, let me clarify. I'm not asking the steam packet to run at a loss, nor do I want taxpayers footing the bill. But let's not forget, it's 100% owned by the Isle of Man taxpayer, so it should work as a strategic asset for the benefit of us all. That means supporting agriculture, haulage, and yes, hospitality. I want to applaud Deborah Heather from Visit Isle of Man for her recent comments on steam packet pricing. It's very, very rare to see a civil servant speak so candidly. However, the deafening silence from her political counterparts was, well, let's call it rather disappointing. A little empathy for the challenges we face would not go amiss. If we don't review these fares soon, we might as well all just miss the boat, literally and metaphorically.
Thank you, Tom. If I could invite Sarah Comish to begin with, I should add that we have an extra speaker this evening. We've got Rachel Ranson sitting to my left, together with Sarah, and she's a farming business owner. And so I look forward to hearing from both Sarah and Rachel in turn. Thank you both.
Thank you. So I'll just open, and I'm going to start by saying I didn't really prepare a speech. So, and I have cheated also a little bit. We felt when we discussed attending this that it would be very useful for everybody to get an understanding from somebody who does actually have to operate as an agricultural business on the island. And with that in mind, we invited Rachel, who not only has a very keen financial mind and background, but also is with her husband now, operates a farm, and despite all the challenges, they have been operating a really good business. Some of the points we're going to bring up, a little bit of my thunder was stolen there, talking about shipping, but we did recently commission a report into the costs of freight transport on and off the island for the agricultural industry. However, that will most likely resonate with a lot of other industries as well. So it is statistically borne out that Manx agriculture is in decline for the past couple of decades. Challenges have been changing policies both on island and certainly further afield. And in very recent years, my position at the union, I've been there for 3 years, and in that time it's been unbelievably challenging as we're starting to see less support and more pressure applied from government. So I won't hog the microphone any longer. I will hand you over to Rachel for a bit more insight into her farming business.
Thank you, Sarah. So yes, a little bit about me to help the floor then gauge any questions you want. I am married to a farmer and we run a farming business. Probably 6 or 7 years ago, I came home to be permanently on the farm, backed off from my professional career, which is chartered accountant and tax consultant. So lots of responses to the rest of the panel from a tax perspective, but tonight I am here as farming with a financial brain. We set up a business where we wanted to directly sell our meats to the public. I was at home deciding how am I going to make the farm support my family because I didn't have no longer my professional income. And so we went on this journey of, trying to make the farm actually be able to be a business on its own and look after a family, which is pretty much impossible, I'll tell you. We learned a lot because we had to get involved with the meat plant and to be able to do our own butchery, to be able to turn our products into something that you at the public could pay and buy from us. So we learned a lot about the value within what we produce in the Isle of Man. And so at the moment we have a handbrake on what I would call the butchery business, and that's mainly because it's such a hard way to earn a living, but I think the Isle of Man has the potential if we would work as a team, and that's the problem over here. We don't work as a team, we don't work together. That we could have almost a Manx, like from my perspective it's Manx meat, but like a Manx product that is so much better quality than a lot of the other stuff that's in the world, and we could market it to the people who are very wealthy, and that would enable us to then be able to sell it at a much cheaper price to the people that can't afford to pay the silly prices. And it just seems to be that everybody sort of doesn't work together. So tonight I'm really here for more your questions and to try and draw out of me our experiences we've had. I mean, Alan's family have been farming for 5 generations. Isle of Man meats is obviously a huge thorn in our side. And then as they've already brought up the steam packet, we have to face such ridiculously high costs before we even get our products to market that we need to sort of value the products before they even leave the Isle of Man so that the money can be spread out in a much better way. So, thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Rachel. If I could call on Carl to address the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the other speakers. My name's Carl Jock and I run the Mitre Hotel, and I have done for the last 12.5 years in Ramsey. I'm the Vice Chair of the Licensed Victuallers Association, and I'm just going to chat a little bit more, just the simplicity of it, right, rather than within the pub. In the last few years, we've witnessed unprecedented challenges fueled by high inflation, with significant increases in minimum wage and also massive increases in energy costs, together with the VAT at 20% and no change in the income and tax and national insurance tax bans. Together, these factors are creating a perfect storm that are opposing massive difficulties for businesses and will likely have lasting effects on our economy and how our communities interact and communicate as a whole. Inflation. Since the pandemic and Brexit, the Isle of Man, like many places worldwide, has faced soaring price increases on essentials. Food, drink and supplies that all businesses depend on, together with limited wholesale options. Together with limited wholesale options, I feel the inflation rates have been consistently higher here than in the UK, especially with the Irish Sea deemed to be the most expensive stretch of water per mile in the world. This means that Manx establishments are paying higher prices for goods, which puts immense pressure on gross profit margins if the prices aren't matched accordingly. And this has a negative impact on how we can invest in our businesses in the future. Now think about what this means to your local pub. When costs rise, pubs have to make tough decisions. Some may choose to increase their prices, which will deter customers. Others will cut back on staff or reduce the quality of their offerings. Neither option is ideal. A higher price point could alienate our locals, while reducing staff hours could diminish when the pub is there as a service to the public, and could diminish the positive experience that people expect when they come for food and drink. I see this is happening as a whole across the island. We were in London about 6 months ago and happened to be walking between two tourist sites, needed to grab something to eat, didn't realise we were walking through Knightsbridge. If anybody knows Knightsbridge, it's one of the most expensive parts of London. The breakfast was like a Michelin star breakfast in a brunch place, but it was cheaper than what we can get on the Isle of Man. So why is it cheaper in London and Knightsbridge than it is in the Isle of Man? Now let's address the energy costs. With energy prices reaching their current heights, the impact on the hospitality sector is profound. Pubs which rely heavily on energy for heating, cooling, cooking, refrigeration are facing unprecedented bills. Establishments are already feeling the pinch, and these costs will be passed on to customers with increased drink and food prices. I'm just going to talk some random figures that are specific to the pub. A couple of years ago, the Mitre's a complicated electricity bill because there's 6 flats that are owned by the landlady upstairs. It's gone from, say, being £4,000 for 2 months. Now the upstairs electricity has been separated, and I'm paying just for the pub £7,000 and a couple of years later. It's a huge difference, and it's very difficult to articulate that to customers when they're seeing their price going up by 10p, by 20p, by 30p at a time. And it's very difficult because we're the ones on the front line having to deal with people face to face and having these conversations. Like, I'm looking at you all face to face now, but in reality, people in government and the journalists, they just don't know what it's like. But we're getting a contact with the everyday man, and it is not good out there. And we're the ones having to bear the bad news about price increases. Anyway, minimum wage rates have increased a few times over the last few years on the island and appear to outpace that of the UK. While this is a positive for our staff to ensure fair compensation for workers, it presents a significant burden on the struggling hospitality and small business sector. Pubs which traditionally operate on thin margins must now allocate more of their budget towards wages. And especially on the Isle of Man, the minimum wage starts at 18 years old, where in the UK it starts at 21. There's, I don't know, it's about a £1 difference between, as the director of the Regency said, we're paying a hell of a lot more for unskilled labour. Minimum wage, inflation, high energy costs have all come at a bad time following COVID, following Brexit, and the wars that are all over the news at the present. This coincides with our government not following up our increased minimum wage with looking at the income tax thresholds. Why should a full-time employee on minimum wage be entering the higher tax bracket of 22%? All this, as a direct effect on the Mitre, is we've had to reduce our wage bill by reducing hours at certain points. We're about to announce that we're only opening Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday at 3 o'clock instead of at 11 o'clock in the morning for lunches. We've reduced our food offering at the moment to Friday, Saturday and Sunday lunches only. So we're not offering what we should be to any tourist that comes to the Isle of Man. And then this will also lead to restricted projects, delayed maintenance on the building, because whilst we might be shut for a few extra hours a week, the maintenance issues don't stop. The wear and tear doesn't stop. So what does this mean as an overall for the Isle of Man's economy? Our hospitality industry is not just a collection of pubs and restaurants. It's the cornerstone of our community. It provides jobs, supports local suppliers, and creates spaces for human connection and celebration. When our pubs struggle, the effects ripple outward, impacting local suppliers and the broader economy, but also the mental health of our population. We saw this in the pandemic when people were crying out for more social interaction and for how busy the pubs were when lockdowns finished. As few people will dine out for food and gather for drinks, local businesses will fail. This will lead to redundancies and exacerbates the economic turndown. The fabric of our communities are built around shared meals, drinks and laughter. I would like to ask government for more support across the hospitality industry and for all small businesses. We need these support measures to alleviate the burden of inflation, energy prices and lower footfall. In conclusion, the Isle of Man's hospitality industry, particularly our pubs, are at a crossroads. High inflation and all the things I've spoken about, and I'm repeating it, are formidable challenges, but collective effort, including government support and the population's help, we can navigate these turbulent waters. Let's commit to supporting our local pubs and fostering a resilient community.
Thank you very much, Carl, and thank you to all our speakers this evening. And so now it is your turn, the audience, to ask your questions. We haven't got the roving mic tonight, unfortunately, due to technical difficulties. So can I invite you, if you'd like to ask a question, just to walk over and see my friend Sam in the corner there, who's holding the mic. I'm sorry again that we haven't got the roving mic. So, sir, would you like to step up and ask your question, please? Can you tell us your name and address your question?
Hello, my name's Alf Kane. I own, is this on?
Yeah, it is.
I own Castle Ward Farm, which is all the land around the hospital. I arrived by invitation from John Whittaker in the early 80s to set up some business activities on the island. I have never done any business in the island because I just can't deal with your government. We were very, very successful, and I retired when I was 33 years old. Since we bought Castle Ward Farm, I have constantly been supporting the Manx farming industry. Currently, we have 2 young Manx farmers. One raises cattle, one raises sheep. I've never made a profit, never in 40 years. So Alex will not be too impressed with that because we don't pay any taxes. John Webster was the reason I came to the Isle of Man, and it was paradise. Now it's a disaster, and we're not fixing the problems. Alex, on I think it was Sunday, with Phil Gorn programme, said we have £600 million of usable assets, reserves, sorry, and we have 1.2 billion in the NI fund, and they're looking at how they can use that 1.2 billion. May I remind Dr. Allinson, Robert Maxwell once attacked the Mirror Pension Fund, and we all know what a disaster that was. We have a huge, over-bloated civil service, which is out of control. The costs of paying for a civil service, this island just cannot afford it. We have young Manx farmers. We have young Manx farmers who are struggling to make a living. And if I was crazy enough to ask them to pay me substantial rents, then they would just have to give up. So the easiest way is just not to take anything off them. And that's the reality. Not everybody came to the Isle of Man to take the Isle of Man to the cleaners. But we've all seen what developers come to the island, and now we have housing where most young people can't afford. It's crazy. Despite the fact, not this year's conference, but the year before, I said to Alf Cannon, can you please explain to the Manx public, and this thing's on YouTube, by the way, you can go and watch the video. Your government assisted me in abandoning the chance to give the Isle of Man a national glen through the River Glass, which runs for about a mile. And it's the most beautiful part of the island. Bear in mind, guys, it's all the land around the hospital. So people from the hospital could have had a nice day out down by the river just before they pop their clogs. But your government, no, we're not going to repay your riverbanks. It's your problem, despite they have a 2013 Flood Risk Management Act, which says it's their responsibility.
Mr. Ken, I'm very grateful to you for
Yeah,
your
okay,
remarks,
sorry.
which are appreciated. Would you like to ask the panel a question?
Panel, I'll ask John, how do you view the attack constantly on limited reserves?
It's the most worrying part about it is that the reserves are being used and there is no indication as to how they're going to be replenished. I think two things need to happen. One, there needs to be drastic reductions in costs, and two, there needs to be an identification of an economic growth sector to replace those that have disappeared and are.
The NI fund next, John.
And secondly, I was going to ask, what's your view of the government targeting what NI fund?
I don't think they should, basically. I think they should earn the money which they intend to spend. Someone said, I think you did, Alf, that the levels of bureaucracy in the Isle of Man civil service are now out of control. I today looked at just one, that's Manx Care, and the layers of management, it's just unacceptable. And the one easy way to reduce costs on the Isle of Man is to have a much flatter structure. You were saying, for example, that I was involved in, when you came to the island, you came to meet me, and I was relatively senior as a civil servant, but part of my job was to encourage growth, so I saw you and others. I didn't have a long layer of people underneath me. We didn't have agencies. What's the use of having agencies when the department should be talking directly to business?
Exactly.
You dilute the message if you use an agency, and the cost of those agencies is hundreds of thousands of pounds with a diluted message.
My experience was I rang John at the telephone and then booked a ticket to come to see what it was like in the Isle of Man. Simple as that. And we brought a lot of profits through the Isle of Man through our UK activities. Nothing on the island. So we weren't in competition to anybody on this island. And we never have been. But I see disasters coming for this island if we continue with this government's policies.
Mr. Kane, thank you very much indeed.
Welcome.
Would anybody else like to ask a question? Thank you, Mr. Kane. Hello, the gentleman over here.
Good evening, my name is Graham Crowe. I'm a retired farmer, life member of the Manx National Farmers Union. During my time as the Farmers Union rep, as the president, part of, I think it was 30 years ago, I went to Brussels, one of the very few people from my industry that went to Brussels, and one of the things we were talking about was the possibility of the Isle of Man government supporting freight to and fro the island, the same as there were in the Scottish Isles, which was a great boost to that part of the world, that part of the UK. Unfortunately, we were never able to convince the Isle of Man government that support to the industry was possible. We were always told it was against EU policy, and the Isle of Man wasn't prepared to go against the advice of the UK government and support our industry here. Now, in recent times, the NFU have done this report, which has shown that we have about the most expensive piece of freight in the world going across to the UK. As far as I'm aware, that report has been a deafening silence to the production of that report from government. I haven't heard a single word being uttered by anybody in government as to how that report would be received. My opinion would be that that report should be adopted by the Treasury and built on, and work done to see what benefit it would bring to the island if the freight costs and the passenger costs were reduced. What positive benefits it could bring, not only in terms of my own industry, but in terms of bringing, for example, building materials to the island. What additional costs are being incurred by house builders and therefore house purchasers by the sort of freight costs we have here? So my question to the panel would be, how would you like to see that freight report being proceeded on now by the government for the benefit of our economy? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Sarah, would you like to tackle that? Thank you.
Well, when you say tackle it, what I'd like to say to everybody is that this report that we commissioned is freely available. Thank you very much, Graham, for highlighting it. It is available for everyone to have a look at. If you want a copy, please just get in touch with me. I do have my contact details here. And absolutely, it's key. Certainly, we only come at it from the perspective of the agricultural industry. However, there's a much bigger picture here as well. I will argue that the agricultural industry is a key industry for the island. We produce some of the best food in the world, and that needs to be valued. The cost of production is prohibitively high, but the cost of trying to reach a market is it just makes it almost impossible to function. So, as I say, this report is available to everybody. We feel like not only could it turn things around for the agricultural sector to have reasonable freight costs and transparent freight costs, but we think it could make a huge difference for the whole of the island. And just in case anyone's wondering, there are a lot of other countries and jurisdictions that already do support their ferry costs for freight and for passengers in a number of different ways, and all of those have been presented as an option in our report.
I'll just ask a question. What dialogue have you had with the various ministries, the Treasury and DECA, is it, to consider the report? Have you engaged with them? Have they engaged with you?
Yes, so we have met with the Treasury Minister, the Chief Minister, DEFRA Minister and Department for Enterprise Minister and their Chief Officers. So we've had one initial meeting with them where we presented the report. That was in June, I think. Oh, it's a few months ago. We are pushing to follow up on that one, though I've not had a response yet. I was looking to see whether we've also put in comments on the review of the Sea Services Agreement for the Tynwald report, and that was due to be out today, though it seems that that's now been delayed until early next year, but I don't know why.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Sorry, just before you...
The report has been circulated to all Tynwald members. I'm happy to do that again, but I'm pretty confident that I've sent that to all Tynwald members.
Do you want to ask anything else, Julie? No. You okay? Can I just invite John to comment on this, what seems to be a very significant point about freight and the cost of transport across the Irish Sea? Can you offer any insights as to why this apparently isn't being prioritised by government? Because it seems from the comments around the table to be extremely important.
I have to be careful here because I was involved in a couple of attempts by companies to buy the steam packet. So I'm a bit compromised and conflicted, so I better not say too much. It was before the government paid more than other companies were prepared to pay. I think, first of all, I don't like generally the concept of subsidising everything. because someone has to generate the money which has to pay the subsidy. It's one person paying for another. So generally I don't like that idea. But having said that, there are occasions when the judicious use of investment can kickstart a particular sector. And the agricultural sector is one where there is enormous potential if a thoroughgoing plan, which would involve the production side, the marketing and packaging side, so that we could develop a brand on the island. If that was done as a comprehensive package of measures to develop the industry, then yeah, I could see that being a sensible short-term use of a subsidy. But in general, I think the island lacks companies which are creating the new money which we so desperately need now.
Okay, thank you. Can I invite Rachel to comment on the whole issue of fares and freight, please? Thank you.
Very quickly, just take off the farmer hat, put back on the tax hat. I work on a daily basis with new businesses, high wealth people, trying to bring their lives over here. And the tax office and the government are very, very frustrating to work with at the moment to try to attract these people. A lot of the other islands are doing a much better job than we are. And if we were to start attracting these kind of people, then a lot of the other stuff starts to fall into place, which is if we try to improve our healthcare, our schools, all of these kind of things, we'd attract the right type of people to the island that are going to bring the money back into the island. But it all falls back to working as a team. So the freight issue is that if I just talk about the meat, because that's the bit I understand the most, but if we as an island create our product in a format, for example, as a sausage, it is a lot easier to ship thousands of sausages off the island and sell them in some kind of format, probably, like I said before, aim for the high wealth people, than it is to, I can't actually ship a pig alive off the island. I would have to do it dead. And so it's that working as a team to try to make that we create the best products we can locally so that we could then package them up together and sell them on a much bigger basis. And the freight thing just limits all the industries, like they mentioned, the building, for us to be able to, you know, make the island better by products being cheaper and things like that. Our island cost, I mean, yes, we have a cost as an island, but if you compare us to the other islands, we're performing really badly as an island. You know, they need to start looking at the models that work. And it goes again as like, it's not just going to be one industry that has to do this, it's going to have to be all the industries that like work together. And I do agree with the subsidy point. You know, we obviously as farmers get lots of backlash on, you know, we're subsidised businesses and it's taxpayers' money. But there are certain parts of the industries that in a way have to be subsidised, and it's not that you're subsidising us, we're trying to help create food that's cheaper for the rest of the place. It's going to be the same with the freight industry. If the money goes in, it's not really needs to be visualised as subsidy, it needs to be looked as a way of being able to try to make that cost difference smaller. But at the moment, our cost difference is so massive that we need to work out how to make it more efficient. And a lot of the time, I think it's because there's a lot of animals leave the island in whole format. The sheep and cattle go off alive instead of in box format, which we could get a lot more in the same container. And therefore, if we worked out how to sell it in that format, as I said, teamwork, I think, is where we lack over here.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. John, I think you want to pick up on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I agree. As I said, judicious use of subsidies can make sense, and that's the classic case. But you touched on something which I think is very important, and that is, it's not just the cost, it's the reliability of services. Both air and sea services on the island, for one reason or another, completely lack reliability. So that's adding days to people's holidays. And I know a lot of people who were intending to come here for one reason or another, sometimes to set up a business, couldn't get here. So if you haven't got a reliable air or sea service, well, exactly. How can you develop an island either for high net worth residents or for international business? Now, increasingly now, people are footloose. In other words, they can work wherever they want. We've got someone who spends most of his time working for us on the Isle of Man, for Isle of Man and other clients from his house in France. Now, and he does a good job doing that. The point is, he's now deciding whether to spend all of his time in France and none of it here, because here is increasingly less attractive. We don't have a good medical service, we don't have, as I said, you can't get on and off the Isle of Man very easily. Thanks to Dr. Allison, we now don't know whether we've got a stable tax system. Income tax went up by 10% last year, and allowances haven't been indexed. So people who are looking at the Isle of Man don't have the certainty they once had that the Isle of Man would be competitive with the Channel Isles and would have a stable, low rate of tax. We don't know what the long-term future for taxation here is. So with all of the other problems, all of the basics going wrong, and the island no longer being attractive as a fiscal place, we've got to say, what are we trying to sell? Even I think, my favourite bit of the Isle of Man, it's a beautiful place to live. It was a very safe place to live. We had a great community. All of those things are being challenged by the policies which we now see. So the question I would put to government is, what is your vision for the future of the Isle of Man, other than we're going to have 100,000 people and 5,000 extra jobs? That's not a proper vision. That's just a few numbers which are false targets.
Thank you very much for that. That was very well received. Do we have any further questions, please? Is anybody out there nursing a question and they're just a little bit shy?
You're not letting me ask any more, sir.
Well, no, I'm not suggesting that you're being restrained. We're just looking around the room.
I actually have one.
Sam,
Yeah.
would you like to ask a question? Thank you.
Yeah, so you mentioned before, sorry, I'm not good with names. You mentioned before, John, that we need to, as an island, embrace like newer businesses and like newer sectors, etc. Is part of that, and I don't want to like cause a fight here, is part of the Isle of Man embracing new sectors and new businesses and trying to change like who we support with our limited funds? Is part of that not going to hurt older businesses? Like, seeing as we have limited funds, wouldn't we be abandoning some of the older businesses to try and support and encourage new sectors? So would us encouraging new businesses not also rely on us kind of letting ones that aren't being as successful die out?
Yeah, I think there are two sides to that question. One, a lot of places, Scotland, for example, is very careful when it subsidises a new industry that may be displacing or competing with an existing industry which is competing in the domestic market. The industries which should be attracted are those which are not interested in the domestic market. They are aiming overseas. Basically, they're exporting either goods or services. And we used to have quite a few of those, insurance, banking, e-gaming, etc. We're now, unfortunately, we've lost the impetus from some of those. I'll say this, if you look at e-gaming, we started off by attracting the top companies in the industry, literally the top companies. PokerStars, Microgaming, Continent 8, those type of companies. Now they have lost their focus on the Isle of Man and are looking at other areas. because the Isle of Man is no longer as attractive as it once was. And they are being replaced by Asian-facing business in the grey market areas, which are regarded by lots of people, including those in Asia, as being very dangerous entities to entertain. And we have got to be very, very careful in the e-gaming space, because the problems we've had recently may be overshadowed by more problems in future. As I said, there are a number of people investigating the Isle of Man, and if the Isle of Man government isn't aware of what's happening, then it jolly well should be.
Thank you, John, if I could just pick up on your remarks about the banking and insurance sector. The Isle of Man used to talk a great deal about it having a finance sector for many years, particularly in the 80s, 90s and noughties. But it seems to me that we don't talk about the finance sector anymore. We've gone from approximately 55 banking licenses issued by the regulator to around 11 or 12 now. What's going on in your view? Can it be reversed? And what's going to replace that sector?
Yes, the finance sector comprised a number of different areas, and you could disaggregate it, and you could even include merchant shipping and the air registry, etc. And I think, just going back to the start of those sectors, what needs to be done if you're developing any sector is to look at the potential. Are there any footloose industries which will come to your jurisdiction? Yes or no? If yes, then you talk to those people at the top of those industries. Individually, you don't send, and I'm nothing against the agencies, by the way, I know some people here are from the agencies, but you send your top people, your chief minister, your top civil servants, who can talk the language and talk those companies into coming to the Isle of Man. Once you've decided there is potential, you find out what they want, and then you have the regulations in place before they come, the laws supporting staff, etc., so that you have the full panoply of requirements for that sector. You don't do what appears to be happening in some cases, to say, oh, here's an interesting new sector, and spend a couple of years looking at it and then moving on. What we've had recently is, oh, biomed's the latest thing, let's go down that route. Where's biomed now? Oh, cryptocurrency is a good idea. Oh, I say blockchain. The next thing is AI. What's AI going to do? And we really need to have a thoroughgoing look at these industries before we embark on them and start saying that this is the next best thing. One of the things that could happen is to look at the existing infrastructure, the existing companies on the island, and ask them, is there anything we can do as an island to encourage them to grow or bring their associates? That's the easiest way to develop. But you talk to leading companies, and I'm not just talking, talk to any leading company, and they will say they haven't been approached by the leading politicians. I was speaking to a couple of people not long ago, a couple of companies, and they said, oh yeah, they come, but they don't really listen. They need to go and listen to what those companies want, and then work out whether they can help them. There's enough talent already on the island to enable the island to develop. And all you have to do is go and say to the companies, is there anything we can do to help you? Personally, I've had 5 or 6 opportunities which I've discussed with government, and they've come to nothing because they've run into the sand. And I'll just mention a few. Hotel which had medical facilities, and a golf course. A short circuit racing course in the north of the island with Jeff Duke involved. The government was originally very interested and then decided it didn't like, we had tobacco advertising behind it and they didn't like that. We had an opportunity to bring autonomous cars. One Chief Minister, Alan Bell, was very interested, but the civil service didn't like the idea, so we couldn't bring those autonomous cars to the island. And there's been various other things. You can't get anything done anymore on the island. There's too much bureaucracy, too many layers of civil service, and it could easily be changed if the politicians on the island had the will to decide what they wanted and ensure that the civil service enforced those wills. It's just not happening.
Well said.
There's one observation that was made to me ahead of this evening's meeting, and that is the difficulty and challenge of opening bank accounts on the Isle of Man. I understand from one local accountant that his client, who was opening a new business, had to wait practically 1 year to open a bank account, and it made me wonder whether there was an issue regarding the location of the governance of our major banks now, some of which of course have their governance based in the Channel Islands, and it's whether we're losing the competitive edge because of those governance arrangements, and whether in fact something might be done in that direction to improve the competitiveness of our banking sector, because obviously the banking sector is the backbone of our economy, and if people cannot open bank accounts, then add that to the observations about the unreliable sea and air services and all the other challenges of getting things done. It's going to really create a bottleneck from which people will turn away in droves. I wondered if you had any observations about the banking sector, John.
I thought there was only a number of words I could have. I thought exceeded my quota of words. The banking sector is one which depends on confidence, and when I was involved with government, we went to America and we took the Chief Minister, the Treasury Minister, the head of the FSC, the head of tax, and we spoke to various banks over there. And we found, and we also spoke to the government institutions in America, the FDIC, the Treasury, SEC, etc. And it became apparent that the Isle of Man was on an unofficial blacklist. But when we were there, we were able to say to people, well, this is the chap in charge of regulation, this is the chap in charge of taxation. They will tell you what the reality of the Isle of Man is. So please forget all the prejudice you've been imbued with in the past. The reality you can hear from the people involved. Now that changed the thinking, and they said, okay, and as a result of that, we got some business from the Isle of Man. We did exactly the same in other places as well. Small, high-level delegations talking to the right people, not road shows and things like that, because you don't get the credible people going to the road show. We found that out in our research. We went to see KBNG and said, oh, you came to the 21 Club when we had a road show at the Isle of Man last year, didn't you? He said, well, I didn't. I sent someone on a training course. I didn't go. In other words, you have to talk to the right people. We don't seem to be doing that anymore. Answering your question, Damien, what's happening to the banking sector? I just think we've lost contact with the decision makers. So the decision makers are saying, well, Jersey seems to be the place. It's near the continent. It's a nice place to live. I like there. My wife likes living there. The wife is very influential in decision making, although a lot of people don't realise that. If someone says, I'm going to the whatever, a remote place, and the wife doesn't like it, that business doesn't go there. But Jersey has a better reputation for being near the continent, etc., etc. So the banking sector has gravitated to the Channel Isles, and we have lost that contact that we once had with the decision makers. We need to regain it, and we can't regain it by sending out a salesman. We have to do it at the right level. We have to have credible politicians talking in a credible way, a sensible way, to the right people. And that's how you get business. But we don't seem to be doing it anymore.
Thank you, John. Can I just invite Rachel to reply? Thank you.
Banking and tax are 2 points that just come up recently in my mind. Tax office have definitely actively stopped some very big players parking some of their very big workers on the island who are happy to work remotely and would like to live on an island atmosphere, but because they couldn't confirm quick enough what kind of tax structure we could create, they got bored and they've gone off to one of the other islands. So it's that kind of situation of we're not working together as a team. The people don't seem to have the balls basically to make some decisions, say, well, we could have a special structure for X, Y, and Z. They are actively losing some of these type of people, and it's not just because Jersey's hotter. The Isle of Man's probably prettier, has more space, has more green, so these people were up for coming and were very close to moving. They all have private healthcare. The children would all have been privately educated, so they would have just been bringing positive things to the island. Tax office couldn't make decisions quick enough, and off they went somewhere else. Banking, a few weeks ago, I've been working off island a lot, and what has put me off recommending my client bring structures here is that it could take me 3 years to set a bank account up, by which time they've got bored. And it's there again, it's not being able to access the people within the banking structure as a professional that's on the client side, where I can actually talk to Mr. Bloggs on the phone and he can say, Rachel, as long as you tick box A, B and C, I can have a bank account open for you next week and we can crack on. No one seems to have the courage anymore to work together as a team, as I keep saying, no matter what industry we're in, if we don't all work together and start to trust each other. But the Isle of Man definitely needs to jump on the back of like the big tax changes you've got with the UK government at the moment. The UK is hemorrhaging wealthy people, but you're not attracting them to the Isle of Man at the minute. I mean, there are a few coming here, but as I said, they're just missing the boat, literally, and we miss the boat all the time, and we miss the aeroplanes. But these are all infrastructure things that the wealthy people like. They like to be able to pop to and fro, go here and there. You know, I've been stuck many a time in London trying to get home, and if I was a wealthy person, I'd just go and live somewhere else. And it's sad because I think we have so much to offer as an island, and we are a lovely, safe place. But yeah, banks and tax department at the minute are definitely creating a lot of issues for us as an industry to be able to try and facilitate the wealthy being able to move here. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Stephen, you have a question.
Yes. What I'd like to ask is, mainly for the hospitality and tourist sector, is that we've had the Grand Prix and the TT changes of late, and there's been a lot of criticism of those changes from many people involved in racing and the hospitality and the high streets. My second point I'd like you to consider reply is that we talk about tourism, but we forget that tourism provides the infrastructure that makes the island attractive for us to live on the island. And my question also for the panel on tourism is, do you feel that you've got enough representation in the Council of Ministers directly? Because I know there's been MHKs who have said that we should go back to having a Department of Tourism and Leisure directly into the Council of Ministers. So those are the points points I'd like you to answer, please. Do you support that? Do you recognise the importance of tourism? And what was your impression of the changes of the road races?
Can I invite Carl to comment on that one? Thank you.
With respect to the TT and Grand Prix, the TT this year was good. Grand Prix was an absolute abysmal. We could see the changes in the schedule last year. Grand Prix last year, people had already booked for 2 weeks and they were stuck for basically the second week with nothing to do, and everybody quiet, everybody got taken, places were shut, and so we knew then that they weren't going to come back, and they haven't come back. That's my opinion, and that's what I hear a lot from the tourists that come over. There's no leeway with respect to delays. There's less off days, that just allow people to rest, like as much as they need to spend money, but these tourists need to actually just rest, and the racers need to rest in between race days. And when it all gets jammed up and they're on the course for, 10, 12 hours, they haven't got any energy to spend, or to spend any money in the pubs. So that's my opinion with respect to the Grand Prix and TT. I think it might be the end of Grand Prix, but we'll see what happens. And representation in Tynwald or Comyn, I don't really remember a time with Department of Tourism. Maybe I'm a little bit young for that, but it would definitely be better if the hospitality industry was held in higher regard. When we do ask for something, it just seems to be, it looks like we're just begging, but we're not actually begging. I think we're a massively important part of the economy to make us look more attractive to people coming and visiting the island, especially new people that might want to move to the island. So I think better representation will be massively well received.
Thank you very much, Carl. If I can invite Tim to speak to that point. Thank you.
It's only water. I would agree with Carl. TT was good, but MGP, I think a few years ago it kind of majored very much on the classic bikes, and that had a very large following, certainly of Europeans, Swiss, Italians, Spaniards who would come over because they love the classic. They love to see modern day riders riding classic bikes. I know that still exists to a certain extent, but it's not prevalent. And I think the organisation, the moving away from that, has been detrimental to the MGP. We certainly don't get the same footfall that we did. It's now, although it's in people's mindsets that the TT's 2 weeks, practice week, race week, Manx Grand Prix is the same. In reality, it isn't, but it puts other business off coming over because that's how they perceive it. And really, you've got the practice week, and then you've got the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then it's all over. So you potentially can lose business on either side, basically, which isn't very good. The question you had about representation of the industry, I've been here long enough to remember when we had ministers of tourism, and I think if you really, really want to take this industry forward, hospitality, both the residential side, pubs, restaurants, you need more than just a political member. I'm not being detrimental to the political member, but you need someone who has got a voice, someone who's going to be heard, and ideally someone who has a table in Comyn. And I think that's the only way we will really be taken seriously.
Thank you. John, to reply. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just an observation. I mentioned the attempt to get a short course in the north of the island with Jeff Duke. What became very apparent then was the love, the high regard the manufacturers have for the Isle of Man. And if you follow that on, what was obviously lacking was the use of our TT reputation
to develop opportunities other than just the TT race. For example, what we were going to do was have testing facilities. So people would come over and test their bikes. We would have, they would have, the manufacturers, Honda in particular, design and light manufacturing facilities. Those are the opportunities that could have been developed, should be developed on the back of the TT races. We shouldn't just be talking about, should we have the TT for X number of days and the MGP, etc. We should be looking much broader than that and looking at the overall opportunities which are available, and not just the, should we have a practice on a Wednesday or whatever. Those are just the minor tactical issues. Let's look at the strategic opportunities. So that's all I've got to say, really.
Thank you, John. Do we have any further questions from the floor? Andrew. Thank you.
You're not holding kind of close.
Yeah, well, it's Andrew Jessup, Chairman of Bradman Commissioners. I won't talk about teamwork and government working with local authorities. Just going back to the farming issue at the moment, for many years I've been saying that we should be looking at, adding value to our agricultural products rather than just producing basics like milk, cheese, whatever. We should be combining these. And when we consider that we must be shipping hundreds of thousands of ready-made meals into the island each year for Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's and Co-op to sell, as much as I'm in favour of cooking your own meal, but there's an awful lot of people these days just don't have time or the skills to cook themselves. Surely there is an opportunity for us to be actually producing those meals on island, which will save on that shipping cost for a start and also create additional work. So that's one question for Sarah. Going on to the hospitality issue, I note that Madeira has just cut their IVA stroke VAT rate for hospitality down to 4% from 5%, so whether we ought to be doing the same. But if we're genuinely going to increase the visitor numbers, what do you suggest we're going to do about providing something other than a tent for these people?
Thank you, Andrew. Sarah, would you like to come in on that one? Thank you.
So one of the hurdles there for producing ready meals on island would be cost of production. We don't have those scales on island where you could do that at a cost where you could compete, and that probably brings me round to one of the biggest challenges the UK has got, never mind the Isle of Man, is competing with products that undercut you, that don't have to meet the same high welfare standards that we do. We meet unbelievably high welfare standards on the Isle of Man. Probably, I would inch us slightly above what they do in the UK, because we have a high level of scrutiny. We also have incredibly low disease rates, and that's extremely well managed by farmers and the animal health team. But you're competing against products that have come from all over the world that don't have to meet any of those standards. And so they can produce very intensively, and they can undercut you on cost. One of the other factors we've got, which challenges our routes to market, is the UK supermarkets that operate on the island. And for local producers to try and get into those markets is very difficult. Consumer support would be unbelievably good. But we have to understand also, in Britain as a whole, our food is much cheaper in Britain than it is in other parts of the world. And I know nobody believes that, but you need to start looking at the prices around the world where agriculture has been challenged, and they are paying a lot more for their food these days than they used to. So comparatively, British food is very cheap, but it is much more expensive to produce Manx food.
I'll just pick up from what Sarah was saying, because obviously we had our experience as Ballykelly Farm, creating our own products and trying to sell them to the public. If just even a very small percentage of the population would have weekly come and bought a pack of sausages from us somehow, we'd have had a roaring business. But it was the practicalities of being able to get your products to the people in a convenient format. As a mum, I know that it's much easier to just pick it up from the shelf in Tesco's. And as soon as you sort about trying to sell products within Tesco's, unless, once again, we go as a team and we have, you know, a Manx sort of section within there, we just can't compete against the kind of games that the bigger players play. But our actual produce on the island is literally some of the best in the world, and the quality of what the farmers are producing is amazing, and we're just not cashing in on what it is. We, on a tiny scale, you needed to scale it up, that we were all working together so that, I don't know, we have loads of paperwork involved, passporting our cows so that you know exactly where they were bred and where they came from, and then it goes to the meat plant. And in theory, they should be able to tell you where your steak came from. You should be able to scan a barcode with the technology we have today and see a picture of Alan and I and go, know that that steak came from our farm. You can't. Why? It's ridiculous. Like the technology, the AI we have now, it just...
There's no connection, is there? There's no link up there.
No. There's absolutely no link. We jump through all kinds of hoops for our farm assurance. Like the quality of the actual products we have are amazing over here, and we hear that when the farm assurance guys come over, because the pigs have to have people from away, and they just compliment on how lovely the farming industry is over here, and it's, you know, slightly more old-fashioned are the words they use, but not in a negative way, as in, but we just don't, when our product hits the market, I'm competing against industrial pork, you know, from Spain, which I don't need to eat pork that has lived that life, and I can afford to go and source and buy. And people try to buy products and think that they're buying Manx, and you've blended a teeny weeny bit of Manx pork into a sausage and woohoo, it's suddenly Manx. The rest of it is Spanish. And you as a public buy them and innocently spend a bit more money thinking you're supporting us, and you're not. And that comes back on the industry, that we just don't police things properly. You know, my original job was an auditor, and I just cannot believe, as a teeny tiny island, we can't almost identify which pig is in which sausage, never mind, you know, which farm it came from. But there again, trying to make it work, it just was to get meat plant migraines, as I called them. It was just very, very difficult. And I just think we're sat on something that could work, and it's just how we all pull together and make it work.
Can I just ask a question on this subject? Why we all talk about Tesco. I think some progress has been made and may confirm that. But we've also got another major shop, which is Marks and Spencer's. And we've got a lot of outlets with the smaller co-op stores. Why is it we never see any Manx products in many of the co-op stores? I look, we see milk and cheese, but none of the meat selection.
I think you should ask the co-op that.
Well,
And I think you should ask Marks and Spencer's as well,
But is
where
there
they're not
any
stocking local.
interaction from DEFA, the department tasked with it, interacting with those companies on your behalf?
So they did initiate a Meet the Buyer event last week. I did attend that for an hour. I would hope there's some engagement, but again, it'll come down to scale and being able to produce and meet those standards. And when I say standards, I don't mean welfare standards, and I don't mean farming standards. I mean, you'll know the technicalities of it. You know, so SALSA accreditation for smaller producers, you meet BRC as larger producers, and that's a very onerous thing for a small farm to take on.
So Alan and I, as a two-man band, had to have the same HACCP set up as somebody that was supplying meat to Harrods. So as a two-man band, if Alan was to drop a sausage on the floor, I would hope he would put it in the bin and not feed it to the public. I had to have the most ridiculous set of paperwork to, you know, justify that I'd managed that Alan had picked the sausage up and put it in the bin and not put it in a package and sold it to the public. I get if I'm Harrods and I'm managing thousands of people in a chain that I need all these procedures and that every single person on the team understands the procedures. It costs me thousands of pounds to have my equivalent HACCP set up to Harrods. So one of the reasons I gave up is just the paperwork was stressing me out, because your health and hygiene guy could have come and shut me down. So as far as the public were concerned, Ballykelly Farm was shut down because they dropped a sausage on the floor and fed it to the public. No, it's because Ballykelly Farm didn't have the paperwork in place to prove that they didn't drop the sausage and put it to the public. And it just became very stressful for me because, and it's just like, we did prove that if you could have scaled it up, you'd have had an amazing business, but it is the economies of scale on the island. And your big supermarkets, your Co-op, your Marxies, the hoops we would have to jump through, and to compete against products that, from the public's point of view, why would you spend twice as much on something that's semi-equivalent to the thing they've got on the shelf next to it? It just doesn't work. It doesn't. And as I said, we just need to do the sort of teamwork thing to try to spread the costs on a much bigger scale. And it's maybe not that we produce a sausage, we get it to a big factory in the UK that produces a sausage, whatever it is.
Thank you very much. Can I just invite the gentleman who's just put his hand up at the end there to ask his question?
Hello. It's just a question regarding biosphere. It's just a question regarding biosphere. I mean, one of the things that we obviously, are aware of.
Is the microphone on? Sam, is the microphone on?
Is that better? One of the things I keep hearing is a lot about biosphere since I've become a returning student. I just wanted to understand a little bit more about how obviously we can't scale up production a lot, but we can form accreditation behind biosphere. I just wanted to understand genuine perspectives about the biosphere and about how that could potentially add a new source of revenue.
I obviously came across the biosphere from doing the Ballykelly products thing, and was so excited when I first heard about it because it's such a great marketing tool. And when you speak to people outside the Isle of Man, like my old university friends, they're like, if I could buy your products in London, like, because of all the sort of cleanliness side that comes to it. But there again, we didn't market it very well. And even if we marketed it, my biggest bugbear is the audit of the brand, the audit of the farm assurance stamp that you put on something. There's nobody auditing the different people selling stuff that makes it that the person on the shopping just needs to spend 2 milliseconds looking at it, knows that it's got this thing on it, and this thing means I can guarantee that there's not some stupid loophole that people have done to try to make a profit off the back of calling it Manx, for example. I know that DEFA spent a lot of money on all these Isle of Man sticker things that went on the packaging, and they were all different colours and they meant all these different things. I was involved in it. I still don't know what colour what meant what, and if I turned it over, was it produced in the Isle of Man? Was it packed by a Manxman? Did you have to be born in the Isle of Man to put it in the packet? Like, the rules were just ridiculous. The government need to get behind the audit of it, and they need to name and shame people so that it becomes that you respect it. But I do think the biosphere thing is something that we definitely should pick up on, and it would make our products worth more money.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm conscious that it has gone 9 o'clock and that the allocated time for questions has now come to an end. I'm immensely grateful to the panel and the passion and energy that they've put into responding to all the questions, the very, very good questions that have been raised, and I thank you for that. I think there should be a round of applause. The panel members, please. Before you all head off, can I just draw to your attention that HAG does rely on public donations to put on events like this and keynote speakers, and I'd be grateful if you consider putting a coin into the bucket as they are shaken on the way out. So thank you one and all, thank you for coming.
2 or 3 years.